It's now 9:30, so we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge and then an invocation, Brad, for a
Okay.
prayer for, not only for this meeting, but also for all the incidents that's happened here in the city of Brownsville. We need some prayers, okay?
Okay, let me read the call. Notice of public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code. The Texas Open Meetings Act notice is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a workshop and a special meeting on Thursday, January the 5th, 2012, at 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. In the Commission chambers on the second floor of the Brownsville City Hall, located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street, Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas. Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Let us pray. Father God, we come to you in the name of Jesus Christ to ask for healing for our city this morning. Lord, we ask for healing especially for the family that lost their son yesterday. We ask for healing for Cummings Middle School, everybody involved there. Lord, we ask for healing for those who did what they had to do for the safety of all of our children. And Lord, we ask you to draw all of our hearts to yours so we can receive what we need from you. Help each of us to be what we need to be for all of our children in our community, to draw their hearts to yours and to guide them in the way they need to go. Lord, I ask that each of us be what we need to be to each other today, giving each other your love, your comfort, your respect, in the name of Jesus Christ. And Lord, I thank you for this meeting here today. Lord, I ask you to lead and guide our leaders as they consider the options before them. In the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen.
Workshop item A, review and discussion of a proposed board committee member selection policy.
Okay, before you start, Mark, let me just make it publicly and abundantly clear that the purpose of this meeting is with regards to board appointments. And the whole idea behind this was when discussing this with individual commissioners and with taking a look at what had happened in previous administrations, it became abundantly clear to me by virtue of some of the chairmen of some of the boards that some of the people that were being appointed, although they were very dutiful and serviceable in their efforts, were not particularly had the capacity or had the background to serve in those capacities. And it was my considered opinion that we asked the city attorney to take a look, as well as the entire commission, to take a look at how we can address these issues so that we can get the best qualified people who have the time to serve, and make sure that there is no one that's got any conflicts with regards to any of the activities of those particular boards. And so consequently, it also, I'm sure that all the commissioners here have received a phone call or two, as I have, with regard to, can I get appointed? And then there was a rotation. It's my turn to appoint someone. And I thought that that was a very, not really quite meeting all the needs of what we needed as a city. So this is an attempt, and hopefully a successful one, to try to address those needs and to try to make it a more effective way of appointing board members, as well as those boards serving the city in the capacity to which they were intended to serve.
Mayor, in the fairness to my representation, to John's, to Jessica's, and to Melissa's as a district commissioner, I would ask that even through the selection process, that districts be given their due and be given an equal opportunity to have representation on the boards. Because in essence, our city functions under district representation. We as district commissioners take some of the biggest load on this city when it comes to to the daily activities with our constituency. And due to that, I would also ask that, because of that, due to that, that we be taken into account as district representatives in equally having our representatives on the different boards.
And I appreciate that, and I totally agree with you. I think that that's got to be put into place and somehow consideration for the different districts where they have different interests. So we definitely should do that.
Thank you.
And then there are certain things, I think the city attorney would agree with me, under the law, and I'm not because I'm a lawyer, but because of the fact that whenever I'm asked to figure out what authority I have, there are some appointments that are made by the mayor specifically under statute, and there's some that are done by the city commission, and the procedure is really kind of up to us, but that should be totally taken into consideration. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the commission. I apologize if my voice isn't here. I'm a little bit sick. Just bear with me. In the past, the City Commission has handled board appointments on a rotation list where each commissioner gets a turn, okay? I think it's become clear that there are some issues with that, certainly some areas of concerns. And I think today we can look upon it as an opportunity to revisit the current policy that we're using, or we have been using, to make board appointments, and to explore as a group whether or not a more efficient way of making board appointments, taking into account the various interests of the districts, of the commissioners' right to have an equal input in the roles to making commission appointments. First, in looking at the policy, I think we need to look at the pros and cons of what we're doing now. Okay, I think you could state that. Well, one pro, an individual commissioner may feel that I have a right to a direct appointment, and therefore the interests of my own district can be represented because I can appoint someone directly from my district. And certainly diversity of the community and the right to make appointments which represent the diversity of the community is a legitimate goal. An individual commissioner might also say, well, as an individual commissioner, I have the best right to know who is from my district and who is going to represent that district the most efficiently. And yes, that's a concern. And certainly in making a board appointment policy, that again, the diversity of the community is something that should be a factor in any policy that is adopted by the commission. But let's look at some of the cons. First of all, we currently don't have any procedure to solicit applications based on qualifications. We don't, and if an individual commissioner may say, okay, this is who I recommend, but there could be 10 people out there that are qualified, that are maybe even from that district, and perhaps because that commissioner is dealing with his universe, his world, he doesn't know who else is out there who might best serve the community and his district. Another issue is there could be pressure on individual commissioners to make appointments for political reasons, okay? In other words, I may not really want to appoint you, but you're pressuring me to appoint you to a certain board. And I think the community has the right to have people serving on boards, not because of political pressure they may be putting on individual public figures, but because of who may best serve the interests of the community in that particular board. And finally, you have another issue. When you have individuals making the board appointments, you may end up with someone on a board that the rest of the commission really doesn't, or have a difficult time working with. One of the benefits of having the commission itself make an appointment is that you have a majority or a consensus among the members of the commission that this is someone that can serve on the board and that we can work with them. And the ability to work, or at least a belief in ability to work with someone that's serving on a board, I think is important when you're looking at someone that's going to be making recommendations to the commission, perhaps, or perhaps is trying to carry out the philosophy of the current city commission. So, the mayor basically had talked at one of the last meetings about creating a new procedure, and I thought about some goals that the new procedure should have. First, I think it's important to preserve the right of every member of the commission to have an equal voice in making the appointments, in making commission appointments. Mayoral appointments are something different. But in terms of commission appointments, I think it's very important that no one member, group of members of the commission have a right to influence the process. It needs to be fair. Secondly, board vacancies should be advertised to obtain a pool of the most qualified pool of candidates. 3, the commission as a whole should make commission appointments based on the best candidates for appointment. And I think you eliminate political influences when you make it something that the whole commission as a body itself has to decide. And 3, in regard to mayoral appointments, they statutorily, they are still mayoral appointments, but we could still have a policy where positions are advertised, people who are interested can submit their application, they submit conflict of interest statements, and the mayor can make whatever appointment he wants. But certainly we can have something which guides whoever happens to be mayor in terms of making the best appointment the mayor can make. And finally, I think one of the things we should do is we should create some minimal qualifications for people who might serve on boards for the city. So I've drafted a working draft of the policy that I'm proposing. And this was written by me. This wasn't written by anyone else. This is simply my attempt to come up with something that serves the interests of the commission and what's being requested. If you look at the second page, there's something called eligibility criteria. And basically what we would want is this. We'd want people to submit a written application. We'd want people to be residents of the city. A criminal check. No individual may serve on any civil board or committee who's of a felony conviction who has, within the past 10 years, been convicted of any crime of moral turpitude. I have a prohibition against vendors or grantees. It doesn't make any sense to me that someone who's selling things to a board serve on that board. Similarly, any individual who's obtaining business incentives from a board shouldn't serve on the same board they're getting business incentives from. Okay, so I added something for vendors and grantees to prevent the possibility of conflict of interest in the dealings of the board. The terms should be for 2 years unless otherwise provided by state law or ordinance. The appointments can be made twice a year, are effective when made unless the appointment is made for filling a vacancy, in which the case the appointment should be for the remainder of the term filled. Okay? One of the problems we've had, and I'm not going to address any specific boards or any specific individuals, but we've had a problem with people not getting appointed to boards and not attending. So you basically have an absence, and then people are reluctant to boot the person off the board because it's an uncomfortable situation, perhaps. A rule on attendance: a board or commission member should attend 75% of the board meetings to be considered for reappointment. Any board member or committee member who has 3 consecutive unexcused absences shall be automatically deemed to have resigned from his or her appointment with no further function by the commission. So if you miss, if you're sick, and you're excused by the board, that's fine. But if you miss 3 consecutive unexcused absences, you would be automatically removed from the board with no action needed. So the only action would be a reappointment.
Mark, the only question I have here is, I know that some boards have their own policy. Which policy is going to override which one, or how does one?
What I am proposing is that I think we have to draw a distinction between city boards and boards of separate corporation that have their own bylaws, okay? In regard to city boards, this would take priority over any internal city board adopted policy. However,
in doing that, for the public's sake, distinguish, a city board would be something like the airport board.
Correct.
That belongs under the auspices of the city governance, right?
correct. The 4A and the 4B are corporations formed under the Texas Development Corporation Act, okay? Specific statutes of that act, and they're governed by articles of incorporation and bylaws. So,
So how do we, in other words, I'm fully cognizant of that. What I'm saying to you is that the terms that you're putting here would be for city boards only, but does that apply to the requirements or also to the appointment process? I mean, that again, I don't think we need to make sure that the appointment process to those boards have to be by the city, by city regs. The qualifications and the regulations as to how they govern their boards would be governed by their bylaws. If there's any way we can make that distinction, I think that would be good.
Yeah, that's a correct statement. The way in which we make the appointments is governed by city regulations. In regard to absences on their board of directors, that would be governed by their bylaws. It would be a simple matter to adopt these provisions in their bylaws. So we could do that. It would just have to have that additional step.
Is the absences the only item that would be different? In other words, potentially different? Or would in individual corporations bylaws get around any of these other letters?
The only other thing I could think of would be term limits, perhaps. If the corporation bylaws establish term limits of the director, so things that were internal to their operation would be governed by their individual bylaws. Things dealing with the appointment process would be governed by the commission.
And we could also put in the absence of any regulations that are provided by the bylaws of the corporation, then they'd have to abide by the regulations that the city has promulgated. I would, by default.
Yes, so long as we didn't have a conflict between
That's what
these
I'm
laws
saying.
and state
Yeah,
laws, yes.
right. I just think we need to have some language in there so that the boards don't get confused and saying, listen, we're going to say 2 absences unexcused will knock you off, and then we say, well, the city says 3, and say, who governs?
I actually, looking at the savings clause on paragraph 6, if you look at the second paragraph, I state, in the event of a conflict between this policy and a provision of any article of incorporation or bylaw of a separate corporate entity, such as Brownsville PUB, GBIC, or BCIC, such article or bylaw provision shall control. In the event of a conflict between this policy and any bylaw provision of any internal city board, but not the Brownsville Public Utility Board, this policy shall control.
But precisely my point, I had read this article, and I said, I want to make sure that we know that the appointment, in other words, because what happens is, the board of PUB is also appointed by the mayor or the city or whatever, however we go about doing that.
So something that
I know I
specifically
do it,
states
but
the
I'd like to
appointment
consider the
process.
commission also,
On the what?
on the PUB board.
Which seat?
Huh? No, I mean, the mayor sits on that
Yes.
board, okay? I mean, I sit over there.
By
but-
charter, yeah.
Right.
So something that stated that all appointments would be governed by this specific policy.
I think so, commissioners.
I think that makes sense. That's
Well,
that was my
because
intent in writing it, but
Yeah, no. I'm not trying to create any problems. I'm just trying to make sure we have clarification, because you don't want to take anything away from the commission, anything that's statutorily or regulatory by the charter given authority to the commission. You don't want to take any of that away.
that's correct.
I don't, some of the members aren't here, just maybe if you could type up I'm assuming they should know, but just so that they know, the PUB is established by charter, and that the removal of such members is by election. So therefore, it's one of our only board, it's our only board that functions in that capacity, in that way.
I'll clear that up, Commissioner.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I just had one comment, and I think that I agree with Commissioner Longoria about the representation of the different districts. However, I don't know how to get to that point without having some sort of conflict. For instance, when I first was elected and I was told I had a particular appointment, then that was overridden by other commissioners who told me, well, it really doesn't matter if it's your appointment or not. If so-and-so gets their nomination out first, it's up to that. So the concept of being your appointment or my appointment didn't hold any water, because it was kind of a free-for-all. And I'd like to have that go away if possible, so that those districts can be represented and not overridden by other factors.
Yes, Commissioner. And I think when we talk about the city commission as a body considering the diversity of the community, I think having that as a consideration and binding the commission to some strict numerical, you need X number of commissioners from district, I think those are two different things. I mean, I think the commission consider that as a factor and try to ensure that the appointments they're making as a body fairly represent the interests of the community as a whole. But to say, I can't appoint this person because they live in this district and I need somebody that lives in this district, I don't think that's necessary. And I think if the commission as a whole reaches a conclusion that this individual can serve the interests of, because a lot of these boards, you're not representing your district. It's a community. It's a board where you're really representing the interests of this community itself. So I think diversity is a consideration, but it shouldn't bind the commission, according to some strict numerical formula.
So how do we get around, should there be a statement of intent to represent the, I don't know how to
Well, I think I
accomplish
could.
that.
I think I could add to the proposed policy that diversity is one factor to consider, is one factor, perhaps geographical diversity, economic diversity. These are factors that the commission may consider in making its decision.
It's a tough issue, to be honest with you, to really address. I think it's going to have to be like what I hope this commission is. It's a team effort, and that the respect would be given to that commissioner who has that district to give him a little bit of a little bit more weight. But again, that depends on the commission.
Mayor, I'll be honest with you, through the last 8 years, I could probably name maybe about 5 instances that there was actually a conflict between commissions on certain board appointments. They're not that many. Many of our board appointments are pretty much standard. It basically, if we're going to lay it out on the table, it comes to PUB, it comes to BCIC, and the GBIC. Those are basically the ones where you'll get some sort of I guess, more of a dialogue between the commission as far as who the appointment is going to be. But other than that, most of our appointments to our other boards are pretty much standard and
No,
fall very well within the commission.
I think we figured out that those are the 3 commissions, the 3 boards that everybody has an interest in, mainly because there's money involved that goes one way or the other. So all that being said is, I think all these considerations have to be taken. I think that the biggest thing for me is that we've talked about some of these things, but we talk about it somewhere else and we don't talk about it in front of the public. And that, to me, is not a good thing. And so I'm glad that we're doing this. So I think that everybody should know that, hey, these are the boards that most people have the most interest in because there's some sort of monetary flow going one way or the other. Fair to say?
Yes. Yeah, PUB has always been, because they deal with our rates. If you look at it honestly, we still have to approve it. Once the PUB board, gives its recommendation, we still have to approve it back at the city commission. But in essence, the city commission has majority always wanted people there that will be able to function correctly within the process to be able to return.
What I was saying there is that particular entity controls a lot of money, okay? Which allows it to have some power, which allows it to have some influence, which gives people some appeal to try to serve on that board. And I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying that that's one of the things that happens. When you control money, you control a lot of things. I can't say it any clearer than that. Más claro no canta un gallo.
Okay. Looking at the additional qualifications, that continued service, any member serving on a board or commission would be eligible for any other board or commissions upon completion of the term limits of their current board. There's a prohibition against concurrent service. Board and commission members shall not serve concurrently on more than 2 boards or commissions. We don't want people overextended. Family service. No spouses or individuals related within 1 degree of consanguinity or affinity may simultaneously serve on the same city board. Spouses and individuals related within 1 degree of consanguinity or affinity may serve on different city boards, provided they comply with any statute or rules pertaining to conflict of interest. So we wouldn't want any husbands, wives serving on the same board. Removal, and again, this would be subject to a conflicting provision, such as in the case of PUB. The city charter regulates removal of PUB board members. but the city commission may remove any board member at any time with or without cause, including but not limited to the failure to attend 75% of the board meetings. So you have an automatic removal provision where if a person missed 3 concurrent ones, okay, that's automatic. It doesn't require any further action. But if a person failed to attend 75% of the meetings, but was making up, would never miss 3 in a row, the commission could still come back and visit that issue and say, you know, maybe we need to get somebody else. So those would be suggested qualifications for service on a city board. Can I have the slide? Not that, the actual slide. Okay. This is a flow chart.
Before you just go on that, there's something that comes to mind that has kind of concerned me. When you say an applicant has to be a resident of the city, okay, can a person be a resident of a city by virtue of their business?
You know, this is simply a proposal, and if someone has a business in the city, and obviously has a vested interest in the city, I think it would be perhaps a good idea. We have a lot of people that live outside the city but have large businesses inside the city that have a vested interest in the community. Perhaps we could say the person lives or works in the city.
Or has, in other words,
or has a business
I
in the
think the
city.
city commission ought to be able to discuss this issue, guys, because there are some people who have a very big vested interest in how this city is governed by virtue of boards. Maybe they can't elect us, but they can also have some sort of input. I want to be as inclusive as possible of all people, especially, you know, there's a lot of people, I see Larry shaking his head, is that they, you know, have a lot to do with the airport, but do not live in the city, but have some sort of, you know, I mean, they may have their city office or something, but they.
We have major employers who I know, friends of mine, live in Rancho Viejo and have large businesses here in Brownsville.
Yeah.
And some of
So
whom have
it's
provided
it's just
some
a
good
thought,
service.
because I tell you what, I would like to have as many people involved in these boards as possible. Because that's also one of the big things that we need to figure out how we market the idea. I think too many people have the idea that, well, you know, I didn't really get involved in the election of any of those guys, so they're not going to appoint me. And I don't want that to be even a scintilla of that sort of thought. I think everybody who's got an interest, and I think by virtue of the fact that they sit on a board, will somehow or another entice them to get involved in the city and do something for the city. So,
If they
and
own, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If they own a business, obviously they do pay taxes in some shape or form to
Well,
the city, correct?
Yes, are you gonna, you know, and then here we have a distinction between someone who works in the city, who perhaps has a major, you know, maybe a director of a hospital or something like that, but who's an employee, versus someone that actually owns the business. I mean, we could say someone who lives and whose place of business was Brownsville, Texas.
or that type of deal. You know. Anyway, that's a consideration, because I do see that a lot of folks that are not residing within the city, but have a big interest, and then they say, well, I can't serve because I don't vote there. And I know that the reason that Larry's shaking his head is because there's a lot of those guys go through the airport.
Sure.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
If I could,
Sure, that's why the workshop's here.
we had an issue pertaining to the airport, specifically a couple of years ago, and it basically dealt with a representative from the island wanting to be on the airport board. A person that lived in South Padre Island. Had no business in Brownsville, but because the airport funnels to South Padre Island, a lot of our tourists come into Brownsville and go to the island, who had an interest in wanting to serve on the board. You know,
I think that's an issue that probably needs to be addressed as we go through here. The whole idea, though, is, you know, and I don't mean to be simplistic about it, but if you have some money interest in here, and if, you know, if my recollection serves me right, Pete, we take care of all the money that goes into the airport, even though it's named South Padre Island and Brownsville Airport. It would be nice if they would contribute, and then they could have a voice. But it's sort of like taxation without representation, or representation without taxation. I'm not a history buff, but it's, it goes back a ways.
Could we go to that slide? Okay, this is basically just a flow chart. Could we expand it a little bit, maybe? Make it a little bigger?
We can see it pretty clear.
Okay. This is a flow chart setting out the procedure that I'm proposing, okay? The first step would be the city secretary would obtain applications of conflict of interest statements. The procedure specifically calls for the positions to be posted and advertised, and also department heads who are related to the board to notify the city secretary that there is an opening. After the idea is the more members of the public who know about this, perhaps the greater the pool of hopefully qualified applicants that the city commission can make an intelligent choice on. I see two different ways of handling this, and I think the commission should have the option of going either way, okay, perhaps based on the individual appointment being considered. I think the city commission could hold a workshop to speak to individual applicants, certainly on a bigger board appointment. It might want to do that. The city commission could also choose to appoint an interview committee to propose a nomination slate of candidates for it to consider. And I think giving the commission both those options would be something pretty valuable. I think in the case of a bigger appointment, Commissioner Longoria, you mentioned those three, the city commission as a whole may want to itself interview and talk to each member of each candidate to see who it feels would best serve on the board. But I don't think that in every instance, every board, the city commission needs to hold a workshop. I think that might be a little difficult on the city commission's time. The commission may say, you know, in this particular case, we want a screening committee to just bring us the best applicants so we can consider this. Now, I think it's important. One of the goals that I had in coming up with this policy was to make sure no one person or no one individual on a commission exerted any kind of unfair control, so each commissioner had an equal voice in the process. So what I would suggest is if you're going to do an interview committee, simply appoint some city staff and don't have any city commissioners sitting on it. You would have a nomination slate if it was the interview committee, right? So if the city commission then decides to vote, on the commission appointment, it would do one of two things. First of all, in the event that it had held interviews in a workshop, it would first consider the candidates that were interviewed. And the board members, the commissioners, would make motions to appoint or second from that list of people that went through the interview process. And if there was someone on the list that didn't get a vote or second, then the members of the commission would be free to make a motion to appoint any qualified person that had an application on file and a conflict of interest statement on file, okay? In the case that you went through the nomination slate, I don't think, my feeling is that the nomination slate should simply be a slate of people who might serve, not a recommended list, because this is really a subjective thing, a fairly subjective thing. Who the commission feels is best may not be who the staff feels is best. So I think if you're going with an interview committee making a nomination slate, I think what we talked about was, I'm looking at the proposal. Okay. In the second appointment process for board appointees by the city commission, when there are sufficient numbers of qualified applicants, it's recommended that any nomination committee propose to the entire city commission a nomination list of twice the number of openings of any particular board, but in no case less than 3 if available. Okay, so you would get a nomination slate of candidates ranked in no particular order of at least of two people for each opening, but never any less than 3. So if you had one opening, you'd have 3 nominations that you could consider. All right, so because sometimes there's more than one opening on a given board. So if you had 2 openings, you'd have 4.
But let's say you only have one applicant for one position.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the list numbers of qualified applicants. That's why we began with that. Then that's all you'd have. I guess the commission would consider that.
I don't know, it's just, the idea is, again, I would love to have 2 to 3, people apply for each one of those.
That's what we would hope for.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, all right.
The commission would then either make nominations from the slate in no particular order, basically in whatever order it received motions and seconds. Because if you're talking about ranking 2 people, I mean, I think the commission can do that just as easily as a nomination committee, And then if nobody on that nominations list got a vote or a second, then the commission would be free to make a motion to appoint any qualified candidate who had an application on file who had submitted a conflict of interest statement. Okay, so basically you're doing the same thing. The commission would be required to first look at the people that either interviewed or who went through the nomination process before voting on anyone who didn't go through the process.
And Estela, you gave us a copy of all the boards. Have you actually numerically, how many boards do we have?
I believe it's 25.
25 boards? Okay. I noticed they weren't categorized in any particular fashion. They're just alphabetically. Okay, we have no classification. In other words, as Commissioner Longoria was talking about, there's, like 3 or 4 that are pretty much the ones that are of greater concern, and not that they're any less or more important, but they just have a different kind of significance, if I may.
Yes, and we also have all the ordinances or resolutions by which they were created.
Okay.
In the case of the ones that were created
Okay.
by ordinance or resolution.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry. There's just something that we ought to think about, how, both of those options are available to us, but I would strongly urge the commission to be as much involved as possible on all the appointments that we can, but I realize we're also, our pay scale is a little bit.
So for instance, boards that have to do with ordinances really should have significant representation from each district because the ordinance covers the whole city. That's what you're getting at?
Yeah, and again, I would like to make every one of the boards of equal significance, but I can't, that's just not,
Yeah,
that's not,
it's not
that would
realistic.
not be commonsensical, but I don't want the commission to diminish its power in any way because I think all of these are important.
Mayor, there have been instances where myself, as long as other members of previous commissions, including some of the members in this commission, have at times, I don't want to say yielded, but there was a prime candidate that was applying for that board. And the commission as a whole sees it as, this person would be an asset to this board, and thus, let's say District 3 is up for the council have in the past, members of the board have asked, would you consider this person? Commissioner, it is your appointment, would you consider this person because he or she would be a valuable asset, and this is why, and these are his or her qualifications. And many a times, it has gone that way.
I think it can work, but I don't want to diminish the role of the commission is really what I'm trying to say. And there may be times when maybe an interview committee would be helpful to streamline the process, but the commission has to have full.
The concept of the function of an interview committee is simply to streamline the process. The commission would still get the list of screened candidates and would still make the decision itself.
Sure.
And from that pool,
Yeah.
So the function of the reason this is being proposed is just to diminish the commission's workload.
Yeah, no, and I think it's
where
a good
possible.
idea. The thing about it is, there are certain, in other words, assuming you have that process and there are 6 people that are out there, that interview committee says, well, here's the 3 that we selected. There's in some instances, I think the commission needs to look at all 6. You see what I'm saying? So there are some appointments that, really require a full commission, knowledge of everybody that's been up to bat. so to speak.
And I think the commission would have, in this policy, the commission would have the right to have a workshop anytime it wanted to conduct interviews itself. This would simply be an option that would be available to the commission in the event of, okay, we've got, you pick the best 3 or 4, bring them to us, and it's simply an option. The commission wouldn't have to do that. That's why I've got the 2 different tracks that the commission would be free to choose which track it wanted to go down.
And I would suspect that, knowing the way, I think you ought to leave it where the city commission may hold a workshop or whatever means we do to do that, or in the event, in other words, that second option would only be applied if we decide to use it. I mean, in other words, we have to take affirmative action to use an interview group, okay? Otherwise, it belongs on the commission. That would be a default type of.
Mark, I have a
make
question
the
about on the application. The ones that aren't selected, does their application stay on file? And if so, for how long?
I think the applications stay on file for a year,
1 year? And then they have to reapply?
and then
if
they have to
want?
reapply.
Okay.
Stella, do the applications still need to be faxed in or submitted in person?
They can be faxed in, but we would prefer to have originals,
Okay.
and they can always mail one in or have
Okay.
somebody drop it off.
And what's the time frame, Estella? That part always confuses me. Like, it has to be in by X time in order to
Well,
be
yes,
considered.
because we have deadlines to prepare the meeting packet for the commission.
So what's the deadline?
So normally it's the Monday of the week before the meeting.
The Monday of the week before the meeting.
Yeah, and I think that somehow or another, how do we, in other words, like, if there are some vacancies, we really need to figure out a system whereby we are made aware of a vacancy, not by saying, hey, you know what, December, I've got 2 more vacancies on my board, and so we need to do something about that. I think we've got to have maybe a 60-day provision where the commission is advised. There's going to be, so again, Commissioner Longoria, is that if you've heard of someone or someone has been talking to you and say, listen, don't forget to submit your application. And so therefore that we have plenty of time to take a look at that application, consider that application, and if you don't have it in by the time that could be the final deadline would be the Monday before, but it would be nice to have a little bit more time to consider it. So I would open the discussion at, maybe not right now, but once Mark gets through, is to kind of, timeline would be good, so that we have deadlines, and second of all, if you've got a guy or a girl or whoever it is that says, you know what, I'm going to wait till the last minute, how interested are they?
Mayor, and there's been some instances, and we've been through them, where, the candidate, for some reason, business or whatever, we've tabled. We've always asked the director, is it something that is really, really important that needs to be appointed right now? Well, no, it can wait. And if, in respecting each other's decisions or appointments, we pretty much, even in the previous administration.
Yeah, no, that's true,
it was-
but the thing that's very
Yeah.
uncomfortable, I think you'd agree, is that it's Monday afternoon and somebody calls you and says, well, who are you gonna appoint tomorrow night? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know I had an appointment.
Exactly.
And then you're scrambling to
Yeah.
think, and that's not efficient.
I think we need to discuss that and figure out whether there's something that's equitable. And again, I think Commissioner's correct. I think if somebody, appears on the horizon that perhaps was out of town in business and they all of a sudden comes in and says, hey, I didn't realize this was happening, but I really am, and the person is really well qualified, would be a wonderful thing for the city. We certainly ought to take a look at it.
So that's basically the procedure that we're suggesting, and I certainly can make the change where the default is interview under by city commission workshop, and then if the city commission takes affirmative action to appoint an interview committee, it can do that.
I would suggest that, guys. I don't know, it's up to y'all, but I don't want to diminish the role of the commissioners and the board appointments in any way. I just need to have it a more of a regulatory process, which is uniform, which is fair. And then the other thing is, if we're made known that, in other words, a vacancy has to be filled within 30 days of when it becomes available. I know that some of the provisions and some of the bylaws are, if they don't get, there's a holdover provision. In other words, if somebody's not appointed, that can happen. But I think for us to go forward in a orderly fashion, that we maybe ought to think about saying, we're going to need to fill these vacancies within 30 days after they become available, and if not, somewhere in there, somehow.
The holdover provision, Mark, is true for all the boards?
Yes.
So we don't have a void, but I think we ought to make it dutiful is to try to do that within a certain period of time, so that we know there's a sense of urgency as opposed to just saying, well, they're just going to hold over for whatever. Just a thought.
Okay, and in trying to look at the process, Texas statutes apply, give the mayor the right to make certain appointments, and certainly we couldn't legally restrict that. I don't think that would be legally proper. But what I would suggest is making the application process applicable to mayoral appointments as well. And if you look at the section, it says, the following procedure is advisory, but basically it mirrors the same procedure in terms of soliciting applications. The mayor should, anytime he wishes to make an appointment, notify the city secretary of the vacancy, who shall post and advertise on the city's webpage current and upcoming vacancies on city boards and committees. Any interested applicant seeking an appointment should complete an application packet containing and execute a conflict of interest statement before being considered for a mayoral appointment for service on any city committee. The city secretary will gather all applications which meet the minimum eligibility criteria set forth in this policy, because that's really what you're doing, is making sure the applicants meet those criteria, and submit them to the mayor for consideration and appointment. So that at least gives us, some of the aspects of the policy in terms of advertising for the most qualified appointments. We can have that can benefit the mayor in making those appointments, but certainly nothing's going to restrict the mayor's ability to make any appointment the mayor wants under statute. Okay. So finally, if you look at the end of the page, thinking defensively like a lawyer, I put something on there that basically states that the rights to make an appointment to the city for any city commission belong to the commissioner or the mayor, and that this procedure is not intended to create any kind of procedural due process right or property right or anything like that, and that the city commission does not relinquish any of its rights to make any discretionary appointment it sees fit.
I think you need that language in there.
Yeah, I put it in bold at the end.
Yeah. No, that's good. Like I said, the only thing that in looking at this before, was I was seriously considering, there's two things that I think my objectives are. That we make sure the commission gets, fully involved in this process. It does not diminish the involvement of the commission. And the second thing, it would be nice to be able to have a little bit more time to orderly make these appointments, fully cognizant of all the qualifications. And then when you mention something, it can be faxed in. I have no quarrel with that, but how do you verify, the...
Well, actually, I was trying to get away from the fax and more of an electronic signature, so that we can start doing away with the faxing.
I
But,
can email all commissioners all applications that I receive so that you get to see,
Yeah,
and each application would have the name of the board to which they're applying, or
Yeah.
which they're interested in.
yeah, and I mean, I think there's got to be a way to contact that person. Let's say I want to file for a board appointment, and I live out in Rancho, but my business is downtown. I would like to have the ability to email my application in, but then have your staff make something provision in the application that says to verify that, you are the candidate, where do we contact you, so that you have some way of notifying that person that, hey, I received your application, this is what you want, so I'm going to submit it, that kind of thing.
Yes, and the application has requests for all kinds of, it has requests for their email, their phone numbers, their cell numbers, their place of employment. So we're able to contact these
Yeah.
people.
I don't want to appoint someone that some prankster sends in. So
Mickey
I
Mouse or
want
something.
Mark to be appointed somewhere, and he doesn't even have any earthly idea that he wants to be there.
And I guess I can add to the proposed policy for your consideration at the special meeting, deadlines for consideration, that or do you want any, there's two ways we could do it. We could state that the only individuals that the commission can consider are individuals with excuse me, appointments on file at the time of the meeting, or we could state applications on file as of the application deadline.
Also, should there be a proposed appointee that for some reason has not submitted the application, but the commission is very interested in this particular person? Would you approve an appointment of a person who says, I will submit the application later? And we've had instances where we've had some people not submit.
Exactly.
That's true.
I'm not too keen on saying I'll do it later. That doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, I,
Exactly.
Mayor,
I happen to be of the opinion that if I'm interested in something, I'm gonna go to the nth degree to do what it is that I'm gonna say I'm gonna do. And so I think a little bit of discipline should prevail here. But again, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Mayor, when that practice happened in the past, I wasn't happy with it and voiced my opinion on it. And I agree. If somebody is going to serve on one of our boards, they need to make the time to go submit. If there was a good reason for them not having done so, and we can share it with the commission, then we would maybe table or leave to the next meeting, but definitely not be appointing without the application and process.
I don't think you can take a person on a board that you don't have an application on file for. Now, we may table it, we may extend it, we may have discretionary powers to do some of those things, but I think we have to know, because my first thought process would be, something happens and we go back to the application and goes, well, we don't have an application. Something we didn't know about.
Exactly. You're not
You
following
know,
policy.
you
Procedure.
gotta have, I think you gotta have verification of the qualifications of a person on file so that you have something to stand on.
If you
The
follow,
other,
if we
the
follow,
other thing that I've seen is if, someone's term is over and he's willing to be reappointed, and the commission would like to reappoint that person. Obviously, they've served 2 years or whatever they've served, we would like a brand-new application form. And some people have just not done it. I know of one particular case where somebody, the department emailed this person several times, called this person several times to resubmit an application and did not.
Well, here's what in other
So
words,
those are just
I don't want to
some of the things that I'm
discourage, the
concerned
other
about.
thing is I don't want to discourage people. Let's say you have an outstanding person that's served for 2 years, has made all the meetings, has got all the qualifications. I think all that person needs to do is say, nothing has changed since my time over the application to disqualify him from being there. Because obviously, if he's going to every meeting that he's supposed to, now if he's missed 4 or 5 meetings, then he's already gone. Or I think there's got to be a little bit of discretion there. It says, he only attends 50% of the time, but he doesn't miss 3 in a row. He just comes in enough to kind of stay on board. That would be something that we should consider as to whether they ought to be, Those are the questions that we would ask the people the administration, and we would ask the applicant to just submit or verify that nothing has changed since the time of the original application.
if we follow the timeline ahead of time, then there should be time to accomplish all of that.
Yeah. I think, and that's why I say there should be a timeline that gives us sufficient time to work with. And that's the only thing that I can offer you as far as, additional things that I didn't see in here was just, I know that it would be nice, in many different aspects of the administration of the city, is to have a little bit more time when it's no reason why you can't do it. There's no reason why you can't schedule things and do things ahead of time.
Okay, that brings us to the issue that I was talking about a little earlier. When the commission makes a decision to appoint someone, let's say they go through the workshop and nobody gets the appointment, or they go through the interview slate, nobody gets the appointment, and under the policy, they would be able to make an appointment or make a motion to appoint from any, someone who's completed an application and the conflict of interest statement. If that timeline has any meaning, and I'll give you the pros and cons of both, if the timeline has any meaning, you would only want to consider people that had their application on file by the proper time. On the other hand, if you only have 1 or 2 applicants, you might not want to reset your whole city commission meeting. If you've got, a completed application on file, you may want to just go ahead and make the appointment from the application that's on file. So I could see it working both ways. It just kind of depends.
Well, figure out some language which might, give you that discretion if that's, in other words, and send it to us to take a look at and see how we feel about it. The whole idea, and again, I think as important as these procedural things are, what's equally important at this particular time is to get the word out to people that these appointments are on the table, so that maybe, Estella, you can give us a list of vacancies that are coming up within the next 60 days and email them to all the commissioners and so that we can also get on the wire and say, guys, you're always complaining about this, or you don't like this, here's what's coming up, here's your chance to serve the city. Get as many people involved as possible.
Mayor, that's pretty much all I have for the workshop. Are there any questions in terms of?
I think Estella's got a question.
I just have one real quick question. On the criminal check, is that something that the city secretary's office would request from PD? Or who requests that? City manager?
Well, actually, it's the words, I should probably change the title. It says criminal check, but all the actual paragraph says is no individual may serve in any city board or committee who's a felony conviction. So we can ask them, and hopefully they won't lie. I don't think the city secretary's office has the power to make criminal checks.
Right.
We can ask them to bring a criminal check.
We can ask them to bring
If we're given an extended time period.
How do y'all do it for employees? Do y'all do any background checks?
Well, one of the big things we do is we ask the candidate to bring in their criminal history. They can go get their own and bring it to us. That's the
Okay,
easier
I
way to
mean,
do it.
you're talking about employees or who,
Right, and we can
You
do
know,
that with these, we can do that with this too.
I would suspect that, if I'm
tough.
applying for a board, I'm gonna serve the city, and
Alright.
here's my application. I'm gonna just do, what it is that you require me for, but I don't know that I'm gonna go to go get a criminal check for myself to send it to you.
You can't even, that's.
You know.
I think simply asking them to sign a statement swearing that they haven't been.
I think that's all that's required, and I would suspect that you're not gonna have that sort of issue, but once in a blue moon. But who knows? But I would not, I don't want to make this a process that's onerous on the applicants. I want these guys to know that what we're doing here is to help each other. We gotta work as a community.
Right.
I agree. Any other questions?
You hadn't seen this before?
This was, I think this is a good thing for everybody, so that everybody fully aware of what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and when we're going to do it. So now what happens now is you're going to put some more language in here, and I noticed, Estella, you had, you had it as an action item.
Right. And
Frankly, I don't think that I
can.
can get these changes
Well,
worded properly in the next 45 minutes.
Well, what I'm saying to you is, I don't think you can either. What I was suggesting is that perhaps maybe you do the changes, send it to us, and if we have any objection, then we send it back to you and circulate it around so that we can put this on, let's say, for the next meeting or the meeting thereafter, no later.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to circulate a version with track changes, so you can see where the changes are being made, okay? So you'll have the document that I handed you today, and then you'll have track changes on the side of it to show any insertions or deletions. And then you can go down point by point and see which ones you agree with or disagree with, or have suggestions for, more precise wording. I know we talked about a couple things. We talked about the timeline. We talked about some of the other reappointment issues and the deadlines. And also we talked about making the nomination slate, the administrative committee, make sure that's not the default procedure. Make sure the default procedure is interviews by the commission in a workshop, and then if the commission elects to appoint an administrative slate, because perhaps it has too much, maybe it's budget time and there's just too much on its, it can handle at that time, and it might take a little bit of that workload off. It can elect to do that, but that's just a tool that the commission can choose to use or not to use as it sees fit.
And I would suggest, and again, Commissioners, I wish you would chime in on this one, that we be notified 60 days prior to any vacancies so that we can all have the ability to spend a little bit of time in sending things out to the constituencies that we represent if they're interested in doing something, and even if you help them with an application or something, so that, because people are not going to be used to this, it's going to take us a little while to change the culture, and but it's a good thing.
Yeah, when it first started, the application process, a lot of people saw it as absurd,
Yeah,
you know, and why do I have to fill this out? Why do I have to take the time?
sure.
You know, but I was opposed to it the first time it was actually proposed by Commissioner Triani. And as I got to see it and I got to see the effectiveness that it was serving the process, I came more to, to agreeing with it. And that's, why I attended today, because this is something that has been helping as far as to the people that we are appointing to the boards.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate everybody being here. It's not easy to get in the middle of the week in the morning, but it's good.
Estela, do you think that before the next meeting, you can give us a general sense of which boards have more urgent need? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, we can do that.
I noticed in the 4B board that
The 4B board is having
but
problem with,
the holdover was not intended to be for a whole year, but
Right.
rather until appointments could be made. So when you look at when the commissioners look at your packet, it looks as if there is only one opening on 4B, but there's actually 4
yes, there is one.
openings.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, and I think that's a good point, a great point, Commissioners, is that everybody needs to know there's 4. If an email would come out and say, listen, there's 4 appointments, and if you would just give us a little bit of a statement what 4B does and who's on there already, and so all these commissioners, even the ones that are absent, can. I don't want anybody to say I didn't know about that.
Mhm.
You know,
We
I
have an
want-
information sheet that
Yeah.
we can send you per board.
Yeah,
to know
I
who
just do it
what-
specifically because that's an extremely important board
Yes.
that needs to have as much consideration as possible and have as much people involved in putting board members on there. So it's an extremely,
Mayor, being a former member and chair of that board, I can tell you that it's a board that takes up a lot of your time. It takes up a lot of time and a lot of commitment, so the person that commits to that board needs to be sure that he or she, is committed the same way to PUB and to GBIT, because those are our 3 main boards that are making very big decisions and take up a lot of time.
and they're going to be addressing a lot of issues that are very important for the future of the city. Okay, so everybody, please, talk to your constituents, talk to your people, get as many people involved. The more, the merrier.
Estela, I have a quick question. On those vacancies, are they listed on your website, at the city secretary's website?
I don't, do we have them highlighted in the website? We have all the boards, but they're not highlighted on the website? But they're highlighted in the packet that we gave you. They're highlighted in the packet that we gave you with all the boards?
But for the public to go through? And-
No, the public, I don't have that just yet.
Okay.
We have all the boards
I suggest that
listed.
we do that, but the other thing is, I think on the, as far as the qualifications for the 4B, perhaps maybe we can agree at this time that even, it's not only a resident that lives within the city, but has a business interest in the city, so that we can include as many people. There's a lot of folks that have a lot of business interest, and 4B certainly plays into that, in that role. I don't know how we do that, though, Mark. Do we have to have some sort of,
Does 4B have to change its bylaws or just this one?
4B would change its bylaws to reflect the internal, in terms of the internal procedures, but not in terms of the board appointment process.
But as far as the residency thing goes,
I believe so.
can you please draft that, because we have a meeting next week for
We can do that.
4B? Thank you.
okay. Yeah, and so the commissioners are aware of that. If it passes, let us know, so that we can be, like I said, the idea is to be as inclusive as possible. The more people that get active in city government and in the city activities, the greater our success rate will be.
Commissioners are-
Okay. Mark, I think we have an action item that needs to be tabled. Do I hear a motion?
I moved a table to either the next meeting or no later than the first meeting of February.
Okay. And Mark, as soon as you can get it to us, whenever you get the language changed, if we can do it by the 17th, it'd be
Oh,
great.
I can get you the language change this week.
Okay, and so,
Okay.
and Estella, email the commissioners that weren't able to attend that says, here's what it is, and we're going to vote on it as quickly as possible. Hopefully on the 17th of January, if not the 7th of February. Motion to table?
So,
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion, meeting adjourned.